So since we're running behind schedule, we'll go ahead and get this started.
Yeah, it's a good investment. I'm sorry.
I don't think we need to do it.
If we could go around the table, starting with you, Mr. Honeman, for
Paul Horniman, Anchorage Assembly. Jake Trady, Anchorage Assembly.
Mr. Jackson.
I'm sorry, Albie Grimda.
Tim Steele,
Jennifer Johnston.
Adam Trombley.
Julia Tucker, Assembly Council.
Barbara Jones, Municipal Clerk.
Amanda Moser, Deputy Municipal Clerk Elections.
Dennis Wheeler, Municipal Attorney.
And if we could have the members of the election commission just state their names as well in case you ask any questions.
Gwen Matthew. Bonnie Lynn Babb.
Sue Kinney. Petey Strang.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Mosier?
So the clerk's office and Dennis Wheeler and the election commission began review of Title 28 back in May. We took feedback from the election commission. They wrote a resolution to the ethics and election committee, and we incorporated those suggestions. And then the three of us went chapter by chapter through Title 28 and discussed the procedures that we follow now, areas where they differ from the code. We talked about updating the code with gender neutrality language. We wanted to improve some voting opportunities throughout the code. And then we have a whole section where we incorporate some state criminal laws to allow for local enforcement. We have had one public hearing so far at the December 3rd meeting. Unfortunately, we did not have anyone to testify. We have reviewed this changes with the election commission. We have incorporated a few additional changes. So there is a final version. It's the S1 version that incorporates some minor clerical type edits along with a few other edits from the election commission. Am I grabbing everything?
You're doing great.
Other things I need to check out. One thing that we talked about codifying is, should we have something occur again that happened in 2012? Could we put provisions in the code to address any sort of emergency? So I guess 2012 or any other emergency that may happen. And so we created a whole new section to address emergencies.
What page is that on?
It's towards the back. It's
Section,
starting on page 39 of the S1 version at the bottom.
so we had the conversation, could we extend voting hours? Could we, what other action could be taken, and what powers would the municipal clerk have in those situations?
And I think I explained this when the Assembly's Elections Committee met, that the idea here is to provide the municipal clerk with some authority to bridge that short time period where you're in the middle of an election, but you don't have enough time to gather the assembly together and take action under your emergency powers to pass an emergency ordinance to deal with an issue. So, if it's 7 o'clock and things blow up and she wants to extend the poll for an hour at a certain location, just, let her do that versus trying to get you guys together to take some sort of action. So it's not intended in any way to usurp your power, but it's just to recognize that there may be a circumstance where something needs to be done right then and there to allow people to vote.
That provision of the code does require the clerk to segregate the ballots that would be used in that type of an emergency, so that at some later date we can have a judge take a look at what decision was made and what ballots were included in that emergency, and then a decision could easily be made whether to include them or exclude them.
Some other small highlights from the code, we had a situation in 2013 where we had 11 voters who voted absentee in person or question ballots, and their envelope was not attested by an election worker, and those votes were not counted those ballots weren't counted for the last election, and so we wanted to provide that as a curable. So if that situation occurs again, that there would be a way to remedy it and allow those votes to happen. And this is something that happened on the state level 6 or 7 years ago, and they made a change to their state statute. So we wanted to reflect that in ours also.
Mr. Trainee?
Remember what page is it they've got in here, electronic media, the observers? Do you remember they could not have a camera? What page, do you guys remember?
Yeah, there are some provisions on observers and watchers in this new code.
Yeah, what page is that?
Let me find that.
19 towards the bottom of the page. My concern is we live in an electronic age. Not those of us that are dinosaurs, but people like Amanda. Of course, she broke hers today, so maybe she's going the dinosaur age, but nonetheless. For most people, they've got cameras. I don't have a problem with bringing a mobile device into areas and observer. What I don't want them to do is take a picture of the screen that's got confidential data on it. Beyond that, I don't think we should tell the people they can't have an electronic phone with them, because we're in a phone age.
So one of the things we do here is we incorporate two guides, similar to what the state uses. There's a guide for observers. And observers are the folks that are going to be at the central location where the commission and the election officials are doing their counting, especially with review of absentee and question ballots. And then the poll watchers are those folks that are authorized to be out of the polling locations. So those two guides are incorporated by reference, and they should be in your assembly materials. With respect to observers, we certainly don't want them making or placing calls in here. They need to take that stuff outside. We don't want them taking photos. We require them to sign confidentiality agreements, so anything they see that's of personal information, like driver's license numbers, social security numbers, that sort of thing, they agree that they will not disclose that or use that for any purpose unrelated to the election. So we try to put in some requirements in terms of what they can do and what information they can see and what they can do with what they see.
Okay, so that's your position on this? Because I may want to bring an amendment into this.
Yeah, if you want to, I don't know specifically what it says about the electronic devices off the top of my head, but we can certainly address it.
Mr. Training, I think, in an election, I think that things are different. It's slightly different in an election because even though we are an electronic age, we have a duty to so many people. And I will tell you that this is a big issue for the Election Commission. They were very concerned about the personal privacy and security of voters. And that they were very concerned that the observers were entitled to not only see that information, that's restricted and could be confidential. So they asked us to make sure that to the extent possible that we could limit that information. And we thought we'd come up with a good balance with the confidentiality agreement and then the limited electronic devices. What we did last year, and I'm actually gonna have a work session during the election counting process so you can see some of this. We had some tape on the floor over in conference room 105, and behind 105, behind the tape, they could have recording devices, they could have their cameras, they could have their cell phones. But on the other side of the tape, where the Election Commission was actually doing the work and handling the ballot envelopes and looking at the computer, we asked them not to have those devices. And I think it worked reasonably well. Just to make sure that it's a two-way street, there's a provision in the code where it says that when we're doing the recount, election officials, we can't even have pens. So I'm trying to let you know that we're being consistent and that during an election, it might be a little bit different.
I'm thinking about your experience down in Seattle, for both you were down there. You were in that room, they had cameras on everything.
Correct.
So I just want to make sure we got the same amount of transparency here that you guys experienced down there, because from what I understand the two of you, that was a completely open environment. There was nothing that could possibly be hidden because the cameras were everywhere.
The cameras didn't necessarily share the confidential information,
Go ahead.
So, just to share with everyone, Barbara and I traveled to Washington this summer and we toured King County, which is the county that Seattle is located in. The state of Washington has all by-mail elections, and they have in their counties huge facilities to process the by-mail elections. And so we toured the King County, which is sort of the Cadillac of voting centers. It's massive, it serves the largest population within the state. And they have a room that they process the ballots, and it is surrounded by glass windows, so observers can walk all around the room and see every aspect of the room. But then throughout the room, there is cameras set up at the different workstations, and you can access these cameras. They're web cameras, so you can access them through the web and you can see what's going on. But it's my understanding that they are not sharing confidential information with the web cameras. So it is transparent in the sense that you can see how they are processing these ballots, but they are not putting social security numbers across the web for the public to view. So there is, I think, there's some tension between transparency and protecting people's, and we tried to walk right down the middle of that.
Thank you, Amanda.
Mr. Wheeler, is this a follow-up on this?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 6 of the proposed observer guide, we allow
I see.
observers to have phones, but they need to be silenced, so they can get a vibration, step out of the room, handle the call. We do not allow laptop computers or PDAs in the review area. If the review area is a taped-off section, they may be able to have, as Barbara's indicated, some use of the electronic devices. What we don't want them to do is to capture that personal information and create a situation where we have an identity theft problem. So we're trying to balance those two competing interests.
Mr. Horniman?
And with that, I'm not sure if it's in the section here, so bear with me. What do we do with the media? How do we distinguish between cameras with good zoom lenses? If they're across the room, they can actually zoom in quite a bit. How do we deal with the media? Do they have a special location? Are they not there? Because we get people, when they're trying to get people to come out, it's on Twitter, it's on Facebook, it's on their updates throughout the day, people showing walking in and out of the polls and stuff.
Right, and I think Barbara addressed what we did last time around, putting them in a taped-off area. We didn't have any problem with the mainstream media.
Yeah, I'm
No,
talking about the polling places.
we spoke to them before they did the interviews as to where they wanted to film, and then we made sure that they weren't capturing anything. We have our office maintains a really good working relationship with the different news stations in town.
Polling sites, I'd ask maybe if anybody is working.
Well, at the polling locations, the result is the same. You know, the media is entitled to, you know, you're supposed to be voting, but the issue is the election workers know exactly what is confidential. They cannot film a voter register. So we're probably not gonna let them film a ballot. So during the observer phase and when people are returning things, there's nothing confidential at the return phase. That's chaos here, but it's well organized chaos, and there are reporters here. But when we start counting in the observer phase, it was complicated for the election commission because the reporters did want to hear what they were saying.
That's right.
The reporters did want to see what they were doing. And we did come up with some compromises. Occasionally, we moved the tape. At other times, we told them they could not photograph the ballot envelopes because there could be confidential information there. But as Amanda said, we worked everything out with them at the time.
Mr. Steele?
I did.
Nothing? Oh, Mr. Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going back and forth. But anyway, I have a concern with poll watchers because the way it is now is the party, okay, and the new ordinance allows candidates to have poll watchers. And I'm thinking some of the issues that I see with that is that, you know, parties have trained poll watchers. Candidates may not have trained poll watchers. That's one issue. Second issue is, say for example, we have a crowded mayoral race. There's going to be a whole lot of folks that are poll watching as opposed to, you know, a limited amount. And I think that that's an issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So all poll watchers have to register with the clerk's office, and we provide a manual to them. So they're not just in there without being familiar with what they are allowed to do and not. And we also train our election workers on poll watchers And this year we'll provide our election workers with the manual too, so they have an understanding of what poll watchers can and can't do.
If I can follow up, Mr. Chairman, please, thank you. That's really nice that they're provided with a manual, but parties actually train poll watchers, they train them. And for me, that's an issue.
So
Through the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, if I could, a little more organization here. Is this in reference to Mr.
Yes,
A.
sir.
Jackson? Okay.
So just to help with that issue, one of the things we added here is at the bottom of page 18. Whoever the person is that appoints their own poll watchers, whether it's the candidate themselves or the organization or group, they're required to take an oath. Not only have the poll watchers been provided the guide, but that they have instructed those poll watchers on the rights and obligations under those guides. So our anticipation is that, and our expectation is that those poll watchers will come trained and ready to participate. Now, in a very crowded situation, yeah, we're gonna have to figure out how to manage that. We haven't had demand for poll watchers before to any great degree, so if it occurs, the election officials on site will have to coordinate with the clerk's office to manage that particular polling location so that they're not interfering with the orderly election.
Ms. Jones?
Through the chair, one of the issues that the clerk's office wants to make sure that happens, and we did work with both the election workers in training, we sent out a APB to our election workers, chairs, and we hand-delivered it to let them know, by the way, you're gonna have poll watchers at your polling location. We gave them a little cheat sheet that said, this is what you do, this is what they do. And so we want our poll workers and the poll watchers to work together. It's a team. And all of us are gonna make sure that it's a fair election. So we're working with those people to make sure that they understand what it is they need to do. And I just wanna make sure if we have candidates that are appointing people that don't have the ability to train, the clerk's office could help with that. Because we're the ones that have issued the guide and the rules. We can make sure that everybody follows the rules.
Mr.
If
Shield?
they're certified, do they have identification so that you know that the poll workers understand that is a certified person? Do they have pictures so that they can't transfer it?
The poll watchers that are registered with our office receive a name badge with their name on the front, and then on the back side, it has the information on, you know, if they're with a candidate or an organization. That's on the back side, so that only the election workers can view it. If it was on the front, it could be electioneering or campaigning. So they do have an identifiable badge, and it has their name on it, and an election worker potentially could ask the CID if there's concern, I suppose.
Okay. I'm just thinking, you know, what a poll watcher wants to take a break, and there's another one comes up, and they just trade it off, and they go to the bathroom, do their thing. Anyway, picture would be good.
Continue on, there's no more questions.
I'd like to touch on another section in here that's going to be new. We did cover this with the committee and the commission, of course. That is, we added in a section regarding election offenses. And what we did is we reviewed what the state has on its books for offenses that are as high as criminal in nature. Starting at page 41. Now, because we only prosecute misdemeanors, we did not include any of the felony election issues that the state has, nor did we include anything that the state has in the books that falls within the regulation of campaigns, such that would be in the jurisdiction of the APOC, for example. The purpose behind this is to, one, obviously give people notice of what the expectations are, so we can better point to things in our local code as to what they can and can't do. But two, if in the future we do see a problem area, we can actually prosecute it through the municipal prosecutor's office, rather than relying on the state to decide whether they think it's a priority or not to them. So it gives us a little bit more control over decisions about whether or not this an election offense is serious enough that we want to deal with it, where if we rely on the state to do it, the state may not think it's worth their time and effort, given their resources.
Mr. Trainee?
That's just a quick question. I see the 200 feet from the entrance to a polling location. What do we do when we've got some homes that are within 200 feet? Do we tell the homeowner he's lost his First Amendment or First Amendment rights to have signs supporting a candidate on their own property? And do you really want to enforce that?
I don't know that it's been an issue.
Has.
So I don't know the answer.
It is. I can show you locations in Midtown that are closer than 200 feet.
Yeah,
The entrance to polling booth.
my expectation is that they may need to comply with the 200-foot requirement, because remember, when it comes to First Amendment, it's got to be a reasonable time, place, and manner restriction. So once the polling location is open, the sign needs to be moved back or not used. It's only for that time
You're saying
period.
a homeowner doesn't have a First Amendment right?
We all have First Amendment rights, but they're not unbounded, they're not unlimited.
You looked
We have a
at any-
reasonable time, manner, place restriction, we can use it.
I'm asking, have you looked at any court rulings on this? Because if we really enforce this, Dennis, there are a lot of polling places that are closer than 200 feet to these private property.
Yeah, no, I haven't looked at any particular cases, no.
If you were, Chair, I'd appreciate it. Look at it.
Is this in reference to?
Yes.
Okay.
Through the chair, Mr. Trainee, could you let us know what those locations are? One of the issues concerns schools. Is it a school?
Yes.
Okay, so the rule for a school is slightly different, and I'm not gonna be able to quote it off the top of my head. But the location for, the polling location for a school is, it's defined in the code, and I thought it was, I'm just off the top of my head, I think it's the entrance to the
It's
school.
in
All
this, it's in the
polling
same
places.
section, all places.
All
Oh,
polling places
so
are
it's-
the entrance.
But Barbara, there are schools that are closer than 200 feet to the entrance.
And we pick the polling places.
Okay?
This-
If you go to
the
Airport
state
Heights, I know where the door entrance is, and I know exactly where signs are put up.
Naco
Okay,
Valley
great, so
Elementary.
we'll,
Closer than 200 feet.
if we could please talk about that, that would be great.
Be fine.
Because you've done it.
Ms. Johnson?
Because
And
you've
just
done it.
another follow-up, another problem. I know in the past has been our own parking lot, where candidates have brought their cars into the parking lot to vote or to be part of, I know an assembly member who had stickers all over their car, and they came in for a meeting, and I'm not sure what we do in those circumstances.
They should remove the stickers.
One thing we cover with the election workers in our training is that if someone comes and they have a bumper sticker on their car, and they're in the parking lot all day, the election officials can put a little scotch tape and piece of paper over it. I know that I've worked for the past couple of years at the state of Alaska elections, and I worked at the Pioneer Home as the chairperson there, and they have a newspaper bin in the front, and there's always a candidate sticker on the front, and so I always, as an election worker, knew to go cover that for the day. So you, as our election officials, are trained to be looking for that kind of campaigning and to address it, and we encourage them just to gently ask the people or just to cover it.
Mr. Stewart?
Yeah, the school rules, in terms of employees, they cannot electioneer at the school, but they allow them to have a bumper sticker on their car in the parking lot, and so, that's a little bit of a conflict perhaps, but.
Yeah. And so part of our training for election workers includes being aware of their polling facility and if they see that stuff to cover it up. But the thing that I found as an election worker is if you don't see it, someone's gonna come in and tell you about it, and so then you know to go address it, so I'm thankful for that.
Okay, there are no other questions if you wanna.
Other highlights?
Other?
Are we ending? Are we finished?
No, we're not ending, I just wanted to know if they had another topic.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You wanted to continue.
I guess another thing that we had,
But, yeah,
Well, when we're finished, well,
Okay.
yeah.
okay.
so you'll see there's a lot of language change too, for example, polling places and polls. We just tried to have consistent language throughout, and we are also trying to sort of move away from some of the more archaic language. Polls, we're referring to those as polling places, polling locations, excuse me. Just so that it is more clear to other people exactly what we're talking about. We had things that were called one thing one place and another thing another place, so we're calling all of our election workers election officials, so that way it's just clear across the board.
Mr. Trainee,
Question on page 43 or 44. Refusal to allow employees time off. Are we really saying that as an employer, if you don't let your employees have time off to go and vote, that's an offense?
That's the exact copy of what's on the books right now in state law.
Do the employers know that?
I don't know whether employers do or don't, but.
I mean,
Violation, it's not.
Barbara, it would be good if you would get that message out because
But
It requires
there's a
clarification.
caveat there. So remember, the rule, and most employers do know this, is that if an employee doesn't have the opportunity to vote, so the employee gets 2 hours that the polls are open outside of their work schedule. So if the polls open at 7, and let's say you go to work at 9, the polls are open for 2 hours, you can go to vote between 7 and 9, and the employer has no obligation to give you 2 hours off. The polls are open till 8 at night. If you work from 8 to 5, you have more than 2 hours off to vote. So there's no requirement for those employers to give people time off to vote. It only applies for someone who, for example, would work from 7 until 7, then the requirement would apply.
just we'd let the public know about this. I think it would be good.
Okay.
I just want to see, commits to the offense that refuse to allow employees time off to vote. I appreciate it, but I want to make sure we're not catching employers unaware. Thank you, ma'am.
Ms. Gomboski?
Just one quick question to follow up on that. We have absentee and person voting, so people technically have like 2 weeks, right?
Correct.
And absentee by mail.
I learned that phrase this morning, by the way. I was gonna say early.
Any other hard points?
What about the campaign access to the voter mailing address?
Oh, yeah, that was the big one.
I didn't
What
hear
page
that.
are you talking about, Amanda?
I gotta find it, I'll talk and
Okay.
find the page, you might be better at it, or vice versa, but anyway, during the course of the build-up to the election, the clerk's office gets requests from campaigns for mailing addresses. And, what we decided last year or 2 years ago, if people wanted the ballot mail, we've taken the position that we're not gonna disclose to them the mailing address of the person who wants this ballot mailed to them in an absentee setting. The reason for that is this. Under state law, you can protect your resident address, and there's this notion that you have some privacy right to protect that mailing address. So if you're going to go out to, what did I say last night, Girdwood? No, Timbuktu. If you're going to go out to Timbuktu and you want to get a ballot mailed to you so you can vote and mail it back, we're not going to turn that address over to the campaigns because that's a privacy right inherent in that person. And there may be many, many reasons to protect that mailing address, not the least of which is letting everybody know you're not actually in town. If you have a domestic violence situation, you're not going to want that address exposed to somebody who might then know where you are during the time that you're trying to vote. So, given those things, we made it more clear in the code that we're not going to disclose that mailing address for the absentee voter.
That's page 23 of 44, section F, which, and the new language starts on line 9.
Is it 28 or 23?
23 of 44.
But you may hear about it because we certainly got some complaints last year.
Yes, you did.
Well, it's a big change from past
Campaign
practices.
ethics, yeah.
Both state also, but differently, so it's just a change, it's a big change.
Could we not, in this day and age, could we not allow a person who signs up for absentee ballot to provide an email where they may be reached by a campaign during their absence?
Well, an email address is not required by us, so we don't want to receive that information or be responsible for managing it.
No, what I'm saying is if for absentee only, at a request for campaign, if we're having someone file it, could we not have in our form that it's optional, that if a person wants to be contacted by candidate? Could we not ask that and provide that upon request?
I don't think that the clerk's office wants to maintain additional
If you're gonna give them information anyway, you just give them the information they're opting to include.
We're required to give information that's a public record that has a municipal purpose, so that campaigns and candidates can verify that the person is a
Did you go to school once?
qualified voter. But to give out information of a private nature and for the purpose of communicating it for a private interest to a campaign, I don't think the community wants to be in that business.
I disagree.
Ms. Jones?
So, Mr. Honeman, the issue that I think is really important here is that when the request comes into the clerk, we manage the request, we actually enter it into a database.
Right.
And then we manage that database information, make a decision whether the person's qualified to vote, and then we mail it. So this information is maintained to make sure that we're accurately managing this request to vote and to, and getting the correct ballot out. And then if there would be a recount or a hand count, you know, we're all gonna be looking at that. The purpose, so what you're asking is for us to gather additional information and record additional information. And, you know, because we'd have to gather that email address, and then we'd have to record it and manage it. And I think that goes to what Mr. Wheeler and Amanda Moser are saying, is that it's probably not something that the clerk's office should be doing.
Well, and my response, briefly, Mr. Chairman, is that we're in a new age, and I think we acknowledge that already. And if people had an opportunity to provide that, should they choose, not that it's required, but should they choose, that we should be, and knowing up front that they could, that would be released to the campaigns as they're looking for information. I don't see that this, you know, we can go round and round on whether or not we, as we move into new technology, we just got to talk about voting by mail, voting by email, electronically on a website. However we want to do it in the future, there'll be a day coming.
Ms. Moser, if we could hold on, we have 3 other people in the queue, and we have 20 minutes, so I just want to. And we can always have this discussion on the floor as we debate the topic, Mr. Harlan. Mr. Trainee,
What?
are you in the queue?
No.
Oh, I thought I saw you raise your hand.
No, I was trying to tell you, Barbara's over doing one of these. I want to make sure you got to Barbara.
I actually went to Catholic grade school, so.
I can tell.
Ms.
Put your fingers out
where's
there,
my
Barbara.
ruler?
You're gonna scold them.
As far as this change, the state you know if the state is also doing this, because it was, the state with past practices, they would send out the addresses and just be some kind of conversation. I think we have a relationship with the state election.
Yeah, we did talk to the state. What was confusing about the state's position was that they didn't very well, to my mind, distinguish between the mailing address and the resident address, and you're allowed to make the resident address confidential, which seems backwards to me in some respects.
Yeah.
And so we're providing coverage that I don't think the state does.
So it's good. And I would just, you know, because this is a change, I think probably campaigns would have to start, if we all send out those notices, you know, vote early, vote often. And on that notice, you could put an email address for them to send back to you, where, so then it'd be the candidate's responsibility versus the clerk's responsibility.
Ms. Domboski?
Just for clarification, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to just know, so if somebody's requesting an absentee ballot, if a campaign is requesting, you'll still give the names of the people that requested those ballots.
And their resident.
And their resident address, but you will not give the, whatever mailing address it was.
Correct. Like if they're gonna go to New York.
And you know they're not there, so you wouldn't send them.
Sure.
And through the chair to Mr. Wheeler, this memorandum notes that we made a change on page 9 and 30 and 39. And looking through this document, page 9 is reflected and page 39 is reflected, but page 30 is not reflected, the change that we made in this document to
Which, are you
include.
looking at the S1?
Yeah, this is the newest one that was over on the table. We wanted to include the commission still on that, on line 23.
It's on page
It's on-
29.
Oh, I see it.
It's on page 30 in my copy, the top.
I have page 30.
Maybe check on page 29, because that's what it is on
Yeah.
my version, which is the ones
I
I printed.
picked this one up at the door, which.
I printed mine off from my office.
So it's probably
we have a
my
little bit
version,
different
and
layout,
if you
but-
look at 29,
Well,
Excellent, thank you.
Mr.
Since we
Trainee,
have 20 minutes left, Barbara, on page 26 of 44, B, the way it reads is ballots are counted manually by the election officials at the designated return location. We're getting rid of polling place. Election board shall allow watchers to see the ballots when the votes are counted, don't we want the watchers to be able to see the ballots?
Through the chair, Mr. Trainee, we do not count ballots at the precincts anymore. What happens at the polling locations, they've got the AccuVote units, and there's a memory card in the AccuVote unit. And what we do now, Amanda has some some security seals. They are cable security seals. They have a serial number on them, and the whole unit comes back right now to City Hall. And the memory cards are cut with a wire cutter from and we log them back in, and then we load those here in City Hall. There's no counting that happens at the polling locations anymore. That's why this was.
That was why this was changed?
Yeah, this is
Oh.
really outdated.
So am I doing this correct,
Yeah,
or
you're
am
doing
I?
right. You're doing fine.
Okay.
At the polling location, the poll watchers are allowed to ask for a copy of the printout. I forget what the name of the printout is.
The tape.
The tape at the polling location, so they can take a copy of that with them if they want. So they can have that.
Okay.
But the actual counting hasn't been done at the polling locations for a long time, so this is just getting rid of that old code.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. Jackson?
I really wasn't ready yet, but it's.
Sure, no, well, we can wait.
No,
Mr.
let
Holman
me
has a
tell you
question.
what I want to
Sure.
ask, okay? And thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to thank Mr. Wheeler for his work on this draft. Well, give me a chance, Tim. Mr. Wheeler and Amanda and our clerk, Barbara, thank you for your work. But I also want to ask our attorney, not to put you on the spot, but the Assembly's attorney, what your thoughts are on this revision, if you have any concerns or thoughts. And I'd like to hear from our attorney. And like I said, not to put you on the spot, and if you don't want to say anything. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I actually haven't reviewed the S1 version, and
I mean, the whole thing, period.
well, in general, I think it's a good idea to update the elections code. I participated in a meeting with the elections committee when they did their report out, and I think they're at the grassroots level as our elections deputy of elections has been in getting feedback, and so I think that the work on this is really important. I don't know if all of the election commission's concerns are reflected in this yet, and I imagine you will hear from them if any of them have been left out. There's a couple of things I could follow up with on an individual basis, like with Mr. Horniman's concern. I made a note about that on things like that. But in terms of what has been discussed so far here, there isn't anything alarming, and I think it's all a movement in the right direction.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Holman and then Mr. Wheeler.
Well, I want to, again, thank the municipal staff, municipal clerk, and Amanda, their deputy clerk, the election committee as well, of their diligence, and I see that you're active participants, and you're reminding people, hey, you're reading it and looking for the meat and potatoes. All well and wonderful. It's important for me, especially in light of, there's an article out today, yesterday, I don't remember, there's something about the use of electronic media and social network and all that kind of stuff on campaigns and candidates and politicians, people that are already in office, people that want to be in office. And one of the points that was made was, it's not about what we think. No offense, Mr. Wheeler, but I don't think the municipality wants to get in that. Well, it's not about what we think, it's about what the public wants from the outreach back and forth. And if we provide the opportunity and they say, I opt out, I don't want to put an email on there, good on them. It's not available. But if we provide an opportunity and it is there, then Madam Clerk, we should include it in a database spreadsheet. What's one more line? I recognize it's extra effort, it's extra work, but we're talking about absentee-only requests. So I don't think we're losing out, and we're not doing the public or the voters good work, good government, by adding it as an opportunity. I'm saying, I'm challenging you to not think about what you think about what the public wants and what would be okay for them to accept. They don't wanna opt out, they don't wanna put an email in there, that's fine. But I think we're missing out on the point of, taking a stand and saying, we're only gonna do this and this is all we're gonna do. That's not what the public's looking for from transparent, open, and opportunistic election opportunities. I don't think that's what they're looking for at all. So I may make an amendment, we'll move it, and we'll see. Thanks.
Mr. Wheeler.
I just wanted to touch on some highlights in terms of helping the voters vote that we haven't talked about yet. One of the things we did is create some code that tries to deal with situations where someone's asked for an absentee ballot, for example, and they, for whatever reason, don't receive it. We have provisions in place that the municipal clerk's office will try to handle as many of those phone calls, fax, email requests as they can, and get a ballot out to the voter and back in time so that it can be counted. So we've liberalized that a little bit, recognizing that in the heat of the election on election day, or the eve of the election the night before, it can be a little tough, but to the extent that they can accommodate that, they will. So we've added that. Did you want to touch on drop boxes a little bit? Not that we're going to do that right out of the gate, but.
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier that Barbara and I went to King County in Washington this summer and reviewed how they handle by-mail elections. And interestingly enough, they said that some of the issues that they have had with rolling out by-mail elections is college students don't know where to buy stamps. And so, one thing that they've done, and not just in direct result because college students don't know how to buy stamps, so they've provided an opportunity for people to deposit their ballot in a drop box. So they've set up drop boxes throughout the different counties in Washington, and then if you vote, instead of, putting your ballot in the mail and having it go through the postal service, you can just visit your neighborhood drop box, and it's similar to like what you see out in front of the Lusac Library for returning library materials, but it's safe and secure. So we have added a provision to the code to allow for drop boxes. We had a conversation about, where within the municipality would we have these drop boxes, centralized locations within each of the 6 assembly districts. And so that is on page 38 of 44. Line 38, drop boxes and polling locations. One conversation that the clerk's office has had, I was appointed deputy clerk in August of 2012, is how do we increase engagement within the municipal election process, and it's been my #1 goal as the deputy clerk of elections. That being said, I've only run one election, and that was, learning how to handle all these moving parts. And if you aren't familiar with elections, we hire over 600 election workers. We have 120 polling places. We create a database and ballots. This year we had 45 different ballot styles. We allow people to vote by mail. We had, close to 1,000 people requesting ballots by mail, so we maintain a database with their addresses. We verify all those voters. There's quite a few moving parts within an election, and so our office sort of allowed us to have 1 year to make sure that we captured all those moving parts. Now moving forward, we are moving forward with the #1 goal is how do we increase engagement in this. And one thing that we found is that by-mail elections have higher voter turnout. And I'll give you the numbers from King County because that is what we're most familiar with. On their presidential election, they had 86% voter turnout. So we talk about the high voter turnout with the state elections here in Alaska, 50%, 86%. That's like a high B plus, right?
What was
Blows
it?
them out of the water.
What was it before the previous one before that?
I actually don't have that information right off the
It would
top
be
of my
nice
head,
to
but
have.
we can look into that. So as we worked on these revisions, that was a conversation that we had, and that includes having the drop boxes. So,
So again, US Mail Service gets another ding.
wow.
Mr. Honeman?
Well, I want, please, my earlier comment, don't think that I'm being chastising or I'm emphatic, because I think it's all of us to, kind of as you say, man, is let's try to not only get the engagement in the election itself, but get voter turnout increased. I mean, you look at the scope of the sheet going back to the 70s when we changed from the fall in October to April, and there have been a couple where we've gone but for the most part, we fall around the 30, sub-30, and below.
20.
And in the 20s. And so, you know, what is it that's causing that? And what can we do to make it better? Now, I don't think changing it on a date on a calendar is gonna be the only answer. It's gonna have to take a lot more than what we're doing now. Maybe it's just a matter of being able to be trusted with the information, the data. I don't know, I don't know the exact answer, but I appreciate and I laud all the efforts that everybody's made, and I'm willing to go. I mean, if we can do it by computer, we can do it by fax, we can do it by mail. Whatever we can do to make it a secure and a modified, trusting election, I'd be more than willing to try.
Ms. Jones?
We agree that this is a great community conversation, and I just can only echo what Amanda said. You know, we needed to learn how to run an election together last year, and you all know she did the bulk of the work. But we're ready, and we've already started some steps to increase voter participation. And those of you who are on Twitter or Facebook would know that part of our rationale for working on that this fall is so that during the election season, we are up to speed and ready to go. So our Twitter and Facebook are already done. We've met with another group. I think Mr. Trombley knows that I'm the chair of the Law-Related Education Committee for the Bar Association. And they're doing the theme for Law Day, which is a national program, is Every Vote Counts. And so Amanda came to one of the meetings, and we're gonna, their program actually isn't until May, but we're working with them to get some information out. As you know, this last year, we did work with the League of Women Voters and got the first informational pamphlet out to people about municipal voting. You know they do it for the state elections, so we went back and did it for the muni elections. Because of cost, it was just a flyer that was inserted in the Daily News, but we got good feedback on that. And so we're gonna keep doing things like that, and if you have other ideas for us, please let us know.
Mr. Wheeler?
Just one quick comment before we run out of time, and that is if you have questions about what the changes may mean, if you leave here and have questions over the weekend and so forth, the table that we attached tries to give you a guide as to not only what the change is, but what the purpose was behind it. So hopefully that's
The table's not in the packet,
Is it in our packet?
it should be, because it's sent down as an exhibit A to the ordinance. So it should be in the, it should have been with the original ordinance.
So it's in the agenda? Never mind.
I don't know.
Sorry.
I assume it's available.
We'll send it out to all the members, just so you have it additionally too.
Are there any questions, comments, election commission?
Just a comment that we have not had a chance to look over the observers handbook, so we haven't, approved that yet. But, and a continuing concern of ours is the identifier security for the voter.
And one question for me is, the original version was submitted by the election commission, and it's changed to Chairman Hall. Nothing against Chairman Hall, I was curious if there's a reason for that, or?
Yeah, the reason I did that was because the S1 version came out of our meeting with the election commission yesterday.
Okay.
So there was no way for the committee to actually endorse it unless the committee noticed its meeting and met and talked about it. So.
Sure. And I'm sorry, it's the Ethics and Elections Committee is what originally sponsored it, so the sponsorship
I see.
changed.
I thought you said the commission.
And I did say the commission, and I apologize.
Well, sponsors. Yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to be added as a sponsor, we can do that. We can do it at the meeting, however you want to do it.
Are there any other questions? All right, we're adjourned.